Prime Minister's chief of staff is set to testify today on alleged election interference, and there's possible labor action as well on the way involving hundreds of thousands of federal workers. So here to give us an update on what is happening in our nation's capital this morning is City News Parliament Hill Bureau Chief Cormac McSweeney. Cormac, thanks for joining us.
Not a problem.
All right, I'm going to start with Katie Telford is expected to testify today. Tell me where you're located right now.
Well, I'm standing just outside of the committee room doors here where Katie Telford will walk through around noon Eastern for a 2-hour testimony on foreign interference. She's going to be questioned by opposition MPs about what exactly she knew and when she knew it and what briefings she had with the Prime Minister around foreign interference, more specifically the reports of China's alleged meddling in our last 2 elections. And so opposition MPs are going to try and get more details out of her around that. We'll see how much she really has to say. She might be able to talk a little bit more about the extent of the briefings and the timing of those briefings. But due to national security reasons, a lot of the previous witnesses we've had here, including our top intelligence officials, have been limited as to what they can actually say. So it's not clear yet whether the opposition will get what they're looking for out of Telford at this committee hearing. But it should be an interesting time indeed to have the Prime Minister's chief of staff on the witness stand.
Right. And after this, what comes next after this testimony when it comes to this committee looking into alleged interference?
Well, the committee could decide to call more witnesses. We've heard from a lot of people already, including the Foreign Affairs Minister. As I said, the top intelligence officials, including the heads of our spy agencies. And a lot of those officials actually said that when they looked at the grand scheme of things, they said the outcome of our election was not impacted by meddling. But the question the opposition is really going to try to get at is whether or not the government did enough to try and stop China from meddling in our elections. So that's going to be one of the big questions here, but we could have more witnesses called. The big thing, though, is next month we're waiting for the special rapporteur on foreign interference, David Johnston, to make a call essentially on whether or not we get a public inquiry. It's been a big demand, not just from the opposition MPs, but from a lot of experts as well. And he will give an interim report in which he's supposed to be giving a suggestion about whether or not we see a public inquiry. The Prime Minister said he'll accept whatever David Johnston suggests.
All right, we'll move on to job action, potential job action by some major unions. It could impact about 150,000 federal workers out in Ottawa and beyond. Tell us where we stand right now. We know that there is a strike position that is in effect right now. Does that mean that those workers can walk off as of today if they want?
Yes, they could if they wanted to. And it's sort of in limbo right now about whether they are or are not going to take this job action. I spoke with somebody from PSAC, the big Public Service Alliance of Canada. That's the big union representing all the sort of minor unions that are taking part in this strike. And they said they're not scheduled to have a news conference today. Now, that could be a positive sign that at the negotiating table, things are heading in the right direction. However, on Twitter, I was noticing PSAC members who were tweeting their planning and what they were doing to get ready for their strike, including getting strike captains ready. So it's not clear what's going to happen, but this could be one of the largest strikes in Canadian history. 155,000 federal employees impacted by this, and they could walk off the job. How that could impact you? Well, a variety of different ways. With the unions, the specific sections of the unions that are walking off the job or could walk off the job, that could include processing of employment insurance or immigration applications. The CRA is the big one, the Canada Revenue Agency. They could walk off the job just before tax filing deadline on May 1st. That could create chaos especially for Canadians who are waiting for those rebates that they could be getting from their taxes. There could also be some issues at the border, getting people out of airports on time, so there could be delays there. So a lot of ways in which this could impact Canadians' lives, but it could also be a big problem and headache for the government at a time when they're dealing with, as we've been discussing, other issues on their plate at the moment. The Feds say they are committed to getting a negotiated deal. They're not looking at things like back to work legislation or anything like that. They want a deal, and they say the best way to do that is to stick at the table and negotiate this with the union, and that's what they're hoping to get in the coming hours or days.
All right. And you mentioned the PSAC saying that they don't have a news conference planned for today. If they do come to a negotiated agreement and their strike is then negated for them, how does it affect the CRA workers? Because it seems that there are two separate entities right now. Could CRA then still potentially go off on strike?
So the CRA workers do actually fall under the PSAC as well, but it's kind of weird because they had their strike mandate vote earlier than these other workers, but they had a waiting period, and their waiting period is up today. Meanwhile, the others who made the approval, and that was announced earlier this week, they were technically in illegal strike action mode earlier this week. So they could have already been going on strike, the 122,000. The 35,000 CRA workers are technically on strike today. So if there is a deal, it should kind of be for everybody, you would imagine, rather than the government negotiating these piecemeal deals between the CRA side and the other unions, the other sections of the PSAC. You would think that they would want to get everybody involved. But, there are big questions about pay here, and that's a big sticking point in these negotiations. The union wants a 13.5% raise for their workers over the next 3 years. The government says, around 8.25% over 4 years, a big discrepancy. But the big issue is they're saying, look, we've got an inflation crisis. Our workers need more money. They're going to food banks. The government says inflation's going down right now. They don't believe that they should be having that significant of a raise going forward. There's also a whole work from home issue. So a lot of issues that are still big sticking points at the table. The union says it won't budge. So we'll see what happens. But, this could have the potential impact of affecting a lot of Canadians. It could be one of the largest strikes in our country's history if it takes place. I'm sure the government would hope that it doesn't and that they can get a deal over the next couple of days.
Okay, hopefully we will get more information and an update later on today. Cormac, thank you so much for that. We'll watch out for your reports, of course, on City News Radio and on citynews.ca. Appreciate it.
Anytime.
All right.